Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined by Kobe, and once again a special guest that we'll get into. But before any dialogue starts, I first want to show love and appreciation to those who show it back to us.
What's going on, guys? Matt here again. We've got another fun guest here. This is Leah Marshall. We got the opportunity to be on Leah's kind of discussion group, live, Facebook Live as well, so that was super fun. Thank you for that. As Leah mentioned there, we met Leah through an outreach with the Street Samaritans at a volunteering event, and just got to talking, and here we are about a month later. Mm-hmm. So we're super excited to have this conversation. Without further ado, I will let Leah introduce herself. Why don't you just provide a background of kind of who you are and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. So great to be here with you. So I met Matt and MD about a month ago, and we were in this assembly line where we were packing up care packages for unhoused Chicagoans. And Matt was wearing a shirt that said, "Go to therapy." And I love all things psychology and human connection, and so I was really intrigued by the shirt, and it sparked a conversation between us, and I learned about his podcast, and I listened to episode 1, and I was blown away. I think because it was the caliber of conversation, the vulnerability, but also I feel like a lot of people don't get into this type of work. So I'm 41, almost 42, until like mid-30s, 40s, 50s, and the fact that you guys are doing it at the age that you are now, just like that really like left me floored. So we kind of reconnected after that, and last night I had Matt and MD on in my group sharing a little bit about their journey, and today I'm here to share a little bit about mine. Matt asked me a little bit about my background, and I think where I'll probably start is how I got into creating this group that I have. So when I was in, I think it was my mid-30s, I had a really painful experience with ghosting. I had been dating a guy, and it wasn't exclusive, but we were like seriously dating, consistently seeing each other a couple times a week, and I grew up with a dad that was he's a psychologist, like very comfortable with his emotions, very comfortable with talking about, tough things. And I hadn't had a lot of relationship experience up until then. I was a bit of a workaholic in my 20s. And so I didn't have a lot of exposure, honestly, to like dating different men. And I met this guy, and the chemistry was just like off the charts, and we were connecting so well. And then after 2 months, he just completely ghosted. And it really caught me off guard. It was super painful and confusing. And around that very time, I was at a summit run by Lewis House. Some of you guys might be familiar with the School of Greatness podcast. So I was at his annual conference, the Summit of Greatness, which Jay Shetty has spoken at. And the closing speaker was this woman, Esther Perel. And she's kind of like she's been referenced on SNL, she's done TED Talks, she's spoken at South by Southwest, she's like a prolific author. She's kind of like the Freud of our time. And so she was on stage and everyone was mesmerized, and she closed her talk in dating and relationships were often picked for a role that we didn't audition for. And I had such a light bulb moment because this guy had clearly picked me for a role that I was not interested in auditioning for, and I did the same with him. And I really wanted to like talk to more people about this idea and just like about her work because I was such a fan. And so I started this Facebook group called the Esther Perel Discussion Group. And this was just over 5 years ago. And now we're a group of almost 16,000 people from across the globe. Super vulnerable, super engaged, curious, smart people. And so that's a little bit of my background. This really, really painful experience created this amazing community that I view as my passion and my purpose. And it also, the painfulness of that ghosting experience sparked so much learning and self-awareness about human connection and psychology and all the dynamics in between. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Did you ever think when you started that group 5 years ago that it would get to the point that it's at today?
I mean, no, I thought it was going to be myself and 3 other people. Like, I had no clue. And, you know, we haven't really done any marketing. It's all really been just word of mouth. And, you know, we probably get 6 to 8 posts a day. People are constantly sharing, you know, Esther talks about infidelity. She talks about like loss of desire in long-term relationships. She talks about really sensitive topics. And in our community, we have people who are cheating or considering cheating, have been cheated on, the other person, like we've got all of these different people. And so it forces us to really be respectful, hold judgment, you know, hold assumptions, and really be like curious and trying to understand the place that people are coming from and help them better understand how to navigate their situations.
I'll say, like, I've joined the group.
Yeah.
It's a very vulnerable population.
Yes.
Like, the conversations that are had in there
Yeah.
are like, I did not expect
Right.
that level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think you have the opportunity to be anonymous. But most people aren't. Like,
Right.
most people are on there with their name, and I thought it was really eye opening. And I have one question, like, so Leah at that point in her life, you know,
Yeah.
when you had just maybe ended that relationship, if you will, versus Leah now, what has changed? Like, what did you learn about yourself through that, what you called painful process?
Yeah. I mean, I've learned so much. One of the most profound things was better understanding attachment theory. And attachment theory is, you're nodding your head, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it's essentially like the science of how we respond to connection.
It's like the avoidant.
Yep, avoidant,
Oh yeah,
anxious.
I can relate.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's very much shaped by our childhood experiences. And there are 4 different types of attachment. There's secure, there's anxious, there's avoidant, and then there's fearful avoidant. And I had a very kind of idyllic childhood, very like loving, present, supportive parents until about the time I turned 12, and my mom out of nowhere became bipolar. So bipolar can look very different in different people. For my mom, it was like just like staying up for 3 days, like starting all of these different projects, and then like crashing for weeks in bed, and like really, really needing a lot of support and help, both when she was manic and when she was depressed. And again, it just like came out of nowhere. And so generally when you're exposed to that type of experience, I can go more into attachment theory, or people can like look it up online, but that type of experience will create a fearful avoidant attachment style, which is what I had until I started to do some of the healing work that I've done. And what that means is you're very drawn to like connection and love, but you also associate it with being like unsafe. And so it's kind of like this hot coals, push-pull type of response to connection. And what I realized is my experience with this guy mirrored what I experienced with my mom, because there was like so much presence and, you know, interest and connection, and then it was like the rug was like yanked out under me and it was gone. And that's like one of the reasons why the ghosting was so painful for me, is like it mirrored that experience I had with my mom. And then learning about the other attachment styles, like the guy who ghosted me is something called dismissive avoidant. And dismissive avoidants tend to associate love and connection with being unsafe. And so what can happen is in the early stages of dating, I'm sure a lot of the listeners can relate to this, there's not a lot of fear about what can happen because it's so early on, right? There's not like skin in the game. You're just having fun. And then at the moment where it can feel like, oh, this really could be something, it starts to feel unsafe, feelings of like, I'm gonna be trapped with this person, I'm gonna have to be like vulnerable, feeling like kind of unmasked, which can be scary, especially if you grew up in a family where like emotions were, like we talked about last night, like emotions being unsafe. Like men can be angry or they can feel lust, and those are like the approved emotions, but like feeling sad or feeling like scared or feeling uncertain are seen as like, weakness, and therefore you can't show that. So like the idea of being seen in a relationship and being unmasked feels scary, and that's when someone can pull away. I share all this to say, at the time, I like deeply personalized what the guy did and made it about me. And now I see, oh, it was just his fear response to feeling connection and it feeling unsafe, and him not being ready to like be unmasked and not wanting to be unmasked at that time in his life. So for me, it was the realizing that it wasn't about me, and like the weight being released of like feeling like I had done something wrong, or if I just done this differently, it wouldn't have happened. Like just all of that being released was like super healing for me.
So obviously you've built the awareness now to realize it wasn't about you, it's more about him.
Yeah.
What is that negative experience like, those days that you think it's about you? You kind of alluded to, what could I have done differently, but how does that play with your own mental health when somebody ghosts you?
Oh,
I
brutal.
mean, it was, it's interesting because I think everyone has a different association with ghosting. I think that some of the people who ghost see it as like the kinder option. Like if they have a negative association with conflict, they see it as, okay, this is the conflict-free way for me to step away from a relationship that I'm not interested in. For me, it was like a rough, honestly, couple of years. But it was years that I was really investing in like better understanding relationship dynamics, because I was still kind of like a newbie. So better understanding attachment theory, better understanding like wounds that can get stirred up in relationships, from I'm not enough to I'm gonna feel trapped and not feel free, which is like freedom is a really important value for me, to all of the kind of like negative stories that can surface in a relationship. So for me, I always like try to turn like pain into like learning and growth, and I really just like threw myself into to just like better understanding relationships. And now I'm at a point where I feel like whatever comes my way, I have the self-awareness and the skills to just like navigate it. And obviously like still things can still be painful, but it's not like a level 10 pain, which is what it felt like before.
So just quickly, being able to take that pain and turn it into a learning opportunity, do you now look back at that relationship experience and in a way that makes you grateful for it?
100%. Like if I was given that relationship and being with that person, and all of the learning that I've experienced and who I am today, I mean, it's not even a question. Like, of course, 100%, like the learning and the person I am today.
Did you ever feel, and I asked this specifically to a woman, I asked from a woman's point of view, did you ever feel, because it sounds like you guys were talking for 2 months and it kind of ate at you or messed with you for a couple of years. It's very serious, and so I'm curious, did you ever feel like there was any sort of like pressure? Did you have friends that were getting engaged, married? Did you feel any sort of external pressure, whether it's friends, whether it's family members? Hey, Leah, when are you gonna, when is someone putting a ring on your finger? Did you ever feel, I mean, we talk about women with like having a clock in terms of if they want kids, like, did those play a factor in kind of how you felt and about that whole situation?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I would say I'm really lucky on a couple levels. So first, 100% not interested in kids, so I don't feel that pressure. My parents have never once like pressured me or asked me about kids. And both my sister and I are not interested in having kids, and they're just awesome about that choice. And then I would say I don't feel a lot of like comparison or pressure from friends of mine. I have a pretty clear sense of like my ideal relationship structure, probably more of like a living apart situation where we're not a traditional situation where we're, we date and then we move in together and then we get married and we like entangle our finances. Like, I'm less drawn to that and more just drawn to like really meaningful connections while also having space to do the things that I'm passionate about.
I think I think people that are struggling with that should re-listen to that, because I mean, we've talked about it, like what's normal for society and feeling like you kind of have to fit into that norm. But I think it just differs from person to person in terms of what's best for them. Like, you may or may not have the answer to this question, but what would you suggest? Because I'm thinking of people in the top of my head that are struggling with this, for people that are struggling with the external pressures of, you have friends that are getting engaged. I'm kind of at that point in my life where that's starting to happen, and I know of women specifically that I think are struggling with that same thing. So like, what would you suggest to those people? Because you seem very grounded in your, I don't want kids and I'm okay with that, which is great. Everyone's different. I don't really feel the need to entangle my finances and make things official and move in. Like, I'm okay doing what I feel is best for me. Like, how have you been able to get to that point, and what would you suggest to those people?
Yeah, I remember so vividly. So I think I was 25. I was in grad school, and I was like so lonely. I was just so like aching for a person, like a really meaningful relationship. And I had this like breakdown on my sofa, and I just like cried for hours. And after that I decided, and at that time I really wanted kids, but I think it was coming from just like a place of like really deep loneliness. And I decided, like, no matter what happens, if I turn 30 and I'm still single, I'm just gonna adopt. And
I've heard that before.
Yeah. And then I went through this period where, like, knowing that I had that option coming up in the future, I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna just like design a life that like fills me up. And I started like doing different activities and getting involved with different organizations. And I mentioned like my workaholic phase. I for sure like distracted myself and threw myself into work. At the time I was working in education reform, and there was so much to do. It was very easy to like distract yourself with work, but also like really meaningful stuff. And then I kind of emerged from that phase feeling like, oh, like I actually was making that choice to want to have kids from a place of like emptiness. And now that like I've invested in like really making my life rich and full, I actually no longer want that. So I guess I say all that to say, you're like, how did you get to the place you are? Like, honestly, through deep pain that led to like me making different choices to figure out like who I am and like what really fills me up, and then just like investing myself in that. And I guess I also just want to say, like, it is different if you don't want to have kids, because there's certain realities. But just from my own experience, that's kind of how I did it.
I wonder if the idea of a relationship, having kids, building a family, is so normalized such that when you do come to a point in your life where you feel a sense of emptiness or maybe lack of purpose, your mind may just be conditioned to be, my first thought is, oh, I must be ready to start building a family. You took a different path in the sense that you found other ways to fill up your life, and it just makes me wonder about if people go into relationships or go into the process of building a family because it's so normalized versus this is something that they've actually taken the time to think about, what does it actually entail, and is this actually for me and what I want to do, and in some ways can act as a trap. Would you say that there's validity in that? Like,
100%. Yeah, there's an amazing speaker. I've gone to a couple of her live events, and she has these amazing courses. Dr. Shefali Sabari, she's been on Lewis Howe's podcast, and Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu. She's done like all the podcasts, and she speaks a lot to that, like coming to relationships from a place of lack and wanting to be kind of like filled up, and also just distracted, because relationships they're a way to distract yourself from the stuff you have going on, whether it's the relationship or the kids or the home or the engagement photos or the baby photos or the gender reveal. Like all of that is a big distraction.
And then, like, what does that do in terms of, now you've set an expectation that this other person who's going to come into this relationship is going to fill a
Right.
void, or is going to, fill this sense of emptiness. And, that puts a lot of burden or pressure when you raise that sort of expectation on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And, we talk about expectation and the gap between that and reality then causes disappointment.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe is associated with why so many relationships don't last as long, or what makes relationships unhealthy? Because they're expecting this person to fill certain voids, and the person is just not aware of maybe how to meet that.
Yeah, that's literally the definition of codependency. It's like
What came to my head.
you'll meet my needs and I'll meet your needs. And oftentimes with codependency, they're not like voiced or expressed needs. So it's almost like you go into the relationship with the expectation that someone will be able to like read your mind and know exactly what you need and want without you having to express it. And they'll meet your needs and you'll meet theirs. So yeah, that's super unhealthy and definitely a recipe for implosion in the future.
What would you say? Because I had this conversation with a few people the other day. To someone, so you have two options here. Would you rather be alone? And this will be a different for you, but I guess like more broadly, how do you think about this? Because I know you don't want kids, but I had this conversation where these people said that they would rather be with technically the wrong person and still have kids with them, because that's how badly they want kids, versus not being with the right person who couldn't have kids, for example, or didn't want kids, or just not having kids at all. Like they basically told me, which was not what I would think, that they would rather be with the wrong, quote unquote, wrong person for them to have kids, quote unquote, to settle to have kids. Like, what's your opinion on that?
I mean, I definitely don't want to judge anyone else's choices, so I'm just going to speak for myself. I really want to be at a place where I'm so happy with the life I've created and the relationships I've built that, let's say it's a dating situation, someone can come into my life and maybe I like really, really like them, but I'm so content with myself and the life I've created that if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, like it might, I might be sad, but I'll be okay. And for me, that's kind of like the baseline. My idea of hell would be to like be living in a physical space with and parenting someone who was not a good person for me. That would not be a good fit for me.
Yeah, to me it seems so obvious, but I guess that's just one perspective, because when I talk to them, I mean, it did open my eyes a little bit, but also I couldn't get there, for me, like, I don't know, I kind of have an idea of where your head's probably at.
Well, I tried to argue for that other side of it, and just for the sake of debate, I don't care to judge either or, but I think it comes down to, if somebody has a life goal to have kids, for whatever reason, maybe again that might be just something that's normalized and they haven't taken the time to actually ask themselves, why do I really want this, and do I really want this? But if somebody's life goal is to have kids, they might be willing to make the trade-off, or that sort of sacrifice, in a sense that I may not be in a happy relationship, but it's almost in some ways like a business partnership of raising kids, because this means more to me and it outweighs the cost of being in a relationship that I'm not maybe as happy with. So that was what I tried to impart on the conversation itself. But I don't have a perspective either way. I mean, personally, I lean more in the camp of like, I'd rather just not have kids and enjoy the person I'm with. But
so where is dating now as it relates to like your list of priorities? Like, for me, it was always something that I really wanted, and then now as I've been able to kind of heal and go on my self journey, like I am dating a little bit, but I've made it very clear that like it is not a top priority of mine, because when I eventually if and when do like settle down with someone, I felt like that has to be like a top priority. Like I want to be the best partner possible, and I can't do that right now. Like I have a lot of other things in my life that frankly I'm really passionate about and I want to pursue. So it's a little bit lower on the list, and I think that's okay. Like I guess my question for you is, where does dating rank on kind of your list of things that you want to do? Like, are you actively like searching? Like, I'm just curious, kind of how you're navigating that now.
Do you have space for it now that you're all filled up?
I do have space. I will say that I personally find dating apps just to be vile. I really struggle with them. I feel like they're designed to bring out some of our worst tendencies. Like ghosting, like choosing people based on more superficial qualities versus the things that actually connect us and make us like excited about someone. You know, they bring out this desire to be like validated, you know, is the person that I'm interested in me. And so the way I approach dating is just like living my best life. And like the other day I was at a lunch with a couple women who were much older than me, like in their 70s and mid 60s. And like this woman's like, oh, because we all live in the same like neighborhood area. She's like, oh, there's this guy in my complex who I think would be great for you. Like, would you be interested? And I'm like, yeah, like totally introduce us. So I feel like very open to like opportunities that come my way, but not via dating apps.
So if you had to design your own dating app,
yeah,
you know, what maybe top quality or top 3 qualities do you think are pertinent to be like filtered for or being able to figure out in a dating app? Like the healthy version in your eyes.
Yeah, it would be like, how comfortable are you having a conversation about something challenging that's come up? How comfortable are you with owning your stuff and also like expressing your needs, like what would be meaningful for you to experience from or with your partner? And how comfortable are you having boundaries, like expressing what is okay and what's not okay? Because that's where like the codependency and self-abandonment comes in. You know, if you have someone, and I've dated people like this where it was just so clear that they were so hungry for a relationship or even just like so attracted to me that they were like really, really abandoning things that matter to them. I'm laughing because there was a recent situation where I've been exploring the concept of polyamory over the past few years.
You have to explain that one to me.
Okay, so polyamory is having multiple concurrent committed relationships at once. So the umbrella term would be like open relationships, and under that would be like ethical non-monogamy, which is often when you have a couple that's in a committed relationship and they make agreements about seeing or having sex with or dating other people. And then I would say like the most serious version would be polyamory, which is where it's like multiple concurrent love relationships. So so I had met a guy at a dating app, and sometimes I'll kind of lead with like, listen, exclusivity isn't like something that's really important to me. How do you feel about that? Because for some people, like exclusivity is really, really like an integral must-have for a relationship. And so it was like the third time that we'd gone out twice, and like they were just kind of like fun, you know, dinners and just chatting. And he had wanted to like get together again, and I said like, listen, before we get together, I'd like to have a conversation about something. So I shared with him. And I wanted to get his perspective because, again, for some people it's like, oh, that's interesting. For other people it's like, fuck yes. And for other people it's like, no. And he was very like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I'm in a place in my life where I think that could really work, and like, great. Then we went out again. And then after that time we went out again, he took a couple days and then said like, listen, I've been thinking about the whole polyamory thing, and it's really not a fit for me. And I'm like, great, like, I'm really glad that you, like, were honest and told me. And he's like, we'd love to be friends. And I'm like, sure. And so, like, we did a workout together. And then after that, he was, like, inviting me out to go on a Friday night again. And I could tell he had said, like, let's be friends and let's go out on the Friday night because he wasn't able to show up for his non-negotiable. Like, it was very clear that he still had sexual feelings. And rather than, like, laying a boundary that would serve what he needed, it was like, it was then falling on me to, like, uphold his boundaries because it was so clear that he was not okay with it and that he was self-abandoning to get, like, breadcrumbs of what he wanted.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I feel like that's very difficult to navigate, that overall idea of, like, I almost want, and I'm so open and vulnerable and honest myself that I'm normally the one bringing up a difficult conversation or, like, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I want. And it's like I struggle with the idea of, like, I open up first and then if a lot of times I get back, oh yeah, me too. But it's like if I would ask you the question first, would the answer have been different?
Right.
And because I think some people like, oh, my needs haven't been met yet, so I'm gonna maybe lie a little bit or prolong a conversation to get what I want, and then I'll have that conversation because now at least my needs have been filled or what I thought were my needs. Like how do you think about that? Because, like, that's something that I've, like, more recently had as I've had this journey is, like, I'm always the one doing it first. And then it's like, how truthful, like, I do like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but would the answer have been different if they're the one that's asking, or if I'm asking them first?
Yeah. I think for me, it's really, really easy to tell when someone is self-abandoning and just parroting what you say, because
I like that term, self-abandoning. That's a good term. Okay.
Yeah. But I'll also own, like, back to the ghosting experience that I initially shared about. In that situation, I was really, really wanting to be exclusive with him. And what caught me off guard is he was, like, just out of a long-term relationship, like a 2-year relationship. And that was, like, news to me. Like, it had never, like, come up or been discussed between us. And so when he's like, listen, I'm just out of a long-term relationship and not looking for anything serious.
This was 2 months in?
Yes.
That's like, ding, ding, red flag. You know,
right.
At the time you don't know that, but.
And so what I did was I'm like, oh, well, I'll just, like, bump him down a peg on my priority list. But, okay, that's great, like, intellectually. But in terms of, like, the feelings that come up around that person, like, if I had really been honoring myself and my needs, I would have said, I just don't think that's the right fit for me, and walked away. And so, I mean, I've been there too. And, like, you asked, like, how do you do it? It's like you get to a place of self-awareness where you know your truth so much and you just can't ignore it.
I want to ask you about, when the person ghosted you and you started to ask yourself those questions of why, what could I have done differently? I want to bring up the idea of closure. And without that closure, how that can really weigh heavy on somebody. Did you ever receive direct closure from this person, or did you go and seek out and figure out and give yourself closure because of what you then learned about attachment theories, and now you feel like you figured it all out yourself?
Yeah. It's like a whole saga. He did end up reaching out about 6 weeks later, and this was by text. Totally caught me off guard, was not expecting it. And he was basically like, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that. I know you probably hate me, but, like, I hope you can forgive me. And that just, like, brought all of the feelings back up to the surface. And we ended up, I again, like, self-abandoning. I tried to do the, like, okay, let's be friends thing. And then he would kind of, like, teeter off again. And then I'll just like leave it at that. Nothing else really resulted, but like yet another example of me, my truth, not like being in integrity with my truth. So in terms of closure, it has to come from within. It can be nice. Like I would have so appreciated, and I don't think it would have been at all as painful as it was if he'd been like, listen, this has all developed a lot faster than I was expecting, or I'm ready for, like, you're awesome, I've loved our time together, but I need to step away from exploring this. I think that would have been like, again, I would have been on a very different path because I wouldn't have had the pain of that experience. I needed it, but that would have been a lot less painful. But all of the closure I've had around the experience has come from like the learning I've done about the why behind what he did and the why behind my intense reaction to it. Again, like the stuff with my mom, and being able to not personalize it. That's like, for me, that's the closure. So that's what I'd encourage for anyone who's going through ghosting, or any like heartache.
I want to move to the concept of love now because we've talked about.
Can I say
oh yeah,
something
go
on
ahead.
that
Yeah,
before
please.
we move on? I had like a similar experience last summer where I was kind of ghosted more or less, and I went through a lot of the same you did, but this was kind of the beginning of my journey with therapy, so I was still seeing things a little bit foggy, and I think I was actually doing in the relationship, if you call it a relationship, more out of like an avoidant of like not addressing what I ultimately needed to address.
Yeah.
But I did exactly what you were kind of alluding to, which is like, because the closure wasn't really given to me, eventually they reached out months later, similar to that. Didn't take any self-accountability, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I was looking up, that's how I became familiar with, because my therapist talked to me about these different attachment styles, and she's like, she sounds like she's got more of an avoidant attachment style, you've got more of an anxious attachment style. They often pair together, but they're not good together. And I just remember like going down rabbit holes of avoidant attachment to give myself some validation of like, okay, this isn't as much about me so much as it's about that person and like how they're dealing with the situation. So I was like, the whole time you were talking, I'm just thinking in my head, this is exactly what I went through.
Yeah. And that's actually a recommendation I give to the listeners is, there's a woman, to me, she's like the be all end all when it comes to attachment theory, because there's a lot of different people talking about it online. But her name is Thais Gibson, Thais, and then Gibson. And her community is called the Personal Development School, which I can't say enough good things about. And she has tons of videos on YouTube about the different styles and characteristics and like their unique sensitivities and patterns and stuff. So if you're curious about attachment theory, she's my go-to person.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Love.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We talked about relationships, and love is not always a part of those. Like maybe it's something you build up over time with the person. Had you ever been in love with somebody you had been in a relationship with? And my follow-up question to that is, what is your experience, if you have, letting that emotion cloud judgment or your logic around maybe some of the things you talked about, which is like you've made concessions to or you didn't set your own boundaries, or you gave in. Did love play a role in that? And is that an emotion that can tend to cloud your judgment?
It's funny because there's a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. And it essentially comes when you have a really challenging experience and you do the self-awareness and learning around it to understand all of the dynamics at play.
Sounds like me.
So for me, that was my mom being bipolar. And it was a very challenging time, and she's still bipolar and it still is challenging. But one of there are a couple of qualities that developed in me, which I'm super grateful for. So one is very, very clear on boundaries, meaning what's okay and what's not okay. And I would say the other thing is the self-awareness piece, like having to like really, really know myself in order to be able to say like, this is okay and this is not okay. So I had a connection with a guy, different guy, and it just was like a beautiful connection. Like we had a lot of things in common. It was not a sexual connection for me though. And so this is someone who like I considered my best friend, and it wasn't anything like I wasn't attracted to him. He was a very attractive person. I think it was more of like an energetic thing and almost maybe like a mindset thing. He had a lot of shame around sex because his dad was a chronic philanderer, and so I think he associated sex with like dirtiness. And so that like very much came up in the bedroom. In terms of like closed-mindedness, like we'll do it, but let's not be too into it, like let's not go too long. And it wasn't a fit for me. And so I had to, I tried to do the friendship thing, and I think it was just too hard for him. And actually he ended up, I feel like ghosting is kind of like a pattern in my life. So we were like in touch every day, doing, spending all kinds of time together for about a year. And I had my birthday, and we did like a birthday dinner, and it was so nice. And after that, he just kind of disappeared. And so that was very much a love relationship minus the sex, where I didn't self-abandon. It would have been so much easier to just deal with mediocre sex and keep this relationship. And instead I like jeopardized the relationship and almost lost it, but like kept integrity with myself. So no, that's not something that I tend to do. And I would maybe credit my mom, the freneticness of being around my mom for just like above everything else being true to myself.
So like there's a quote that I read this morning. You threw some quotes at us, my turn. It said something along the lines of, love starts as a feeling, but to continue it is a choice. Mm-hmm. Based on the story you told me, I feel like you might find agreement with that, but what are your thoughts on that quote just generally?
Love starts as a feeling and then as a choice. So of course I have to quote my girl Esther Perel. So she talks about love as a verb, and it's interesting because her parents were Holocaust survivors, and she grew up in Belgium. They were kind of refugees in Belgium and then like created a life there. And so she's European, and she's a lover of languages, and so I think she can speak 9 languages fluently, which means she has a great understanding of like etymology and the origins of words and Latin. And so she has this amazing blog post called like the 7 verbs of love, and it's like to receive, to give, to of course I'm forgetting them. Anyway, look up the blog
Is
post.
it the 7 ways to show love, or
to show and receive love?
Yeah, it's like give a gift, act of service, to affection, like physical affection, I think.
Yeah.
There's a list.
Yeah.
Right?
So what you're referring to are the love languages, which is kind of a similar concept.
Oh, not the same.
So not the same concept.
I tried.
But it's this idea.
A for effort.
I mean, love languages are great. We can go down another rabbit hole with love languages, but it's this idea of like, love is something that you choose to do and do. It's not just like a feeling that you can like surf the waves of for a lifetime. Just like I know like you're big into your career. It's like you're investing in it. You're learning new skills. You're taking on new projects. You're like volunteering. It's like a constant investment. Same with kids. You're wiping their butt. You're feeding them. They're throwing up on you. It's like the act of investing in that person sustains the feelings that might initially like spark with chemistry.
Ooh, that's interesting. I mean, it's similar to like the investment piece. Like, I love my family. Like, mm-hmm. I have to invest in spending time with them. Mm-hmm. Or friendships. Like, you still have to invest and go out of your way and invest that time in them. And I think it's very similar to like an intimate type of love. Like I don't think I've ever been in love, but I also think we think about it similar to like that like happiness. Like it's always going to be there once you reach this like North Star, and you're always going to be happy. Like same thing with love. Like people think once they've found their person that like you're in love and in love forever. Like I think it is a choice to your point, and it's one that you have to constantly work to keep,
right?
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like Jay Shetty said something pretty interesting. He said that there's like 3 types of things that you can do with your partner, and most relationships are all built around that first layer, the most surface layer, which is like entertainment with someone, so like watching TV. The second is doing something new together, which I don't think a lot of people get to. Like I can speak from personal experience in my relationship. So like it would be like going taking an improv class, going taking a cooking class with people that never cooked, like actually doing, and like both, it has to be new to both people. Like it can't be like, oh, I'm a pro at this, but like come here, you try for the first time. And then the highest level or the deepest level is a service. So going and volunteering together. How have those worked into your prior relationships? Was it all kind of that first level? Have you made it to that kind of third level where you're doing all those 3 different steps?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what MD was talking about in terms of the feeling, like that's literally that's chemistry. It's hormones coursing through your body. It's like you're literally a drug addict on your own hormones that your body is producing with that person. But inevitably that is gonna fade away. And that's when the investing in the relationship becomes like the act of love.
Well, so does that then make it in some ways selfish? Because when you brought up the couple examples, like I invest in my career because there's a paycheck on the other end of it, you know, or I mean, that's not every reason for it, but there's something on the other end of it. I'm investing in taking care of my child because we gave birth to this child and I feel an attachment and a responsibility. And you hope that they pay it back or pay it forward in some way, I would think. But what is somebody getting from a relationship if not to fill a void or to not get their fix on their love hormones? You know, like what do I get from a relationship with a companion?
So I believe that the purpose of relationships is to hold up a mirror to ourselves so that we see parts of ourselves that were hidden. So if we use the ghosting example, I was completely blind to and unaware of a lot of the things I was experiencing. I had no idea about attachment theory. I had repressed and completely dissociated from a lot of the stuff that happened with my mom in high school. Like my memories at that time are so foggy and absent. So the act of that connection, it like held up a mirror to me for healing, for growth, for deeper purpose in the world. And for me, that's the purpose of relationships. Sure, they can be like fun and pleasurable and entertaining and connective. But for me, I think everyone needs to define their own purpose for what a relationship will serve in their life.
That's very well said.
It's just interesting that like you go into a relationship and you stand to gain from it, but do you go into one thinking like, is there ever that connection where all of a sudden I feel the need to do stuff for you? Or like I want to go into this relationship for them? It just doesn't seem like that wouldn't add up the way that we're talking about it. Is that making sense the way
I don't think I follow what you're saying.
Because you're saying getting into a relationship holds up this mirror. Right? And you're learning things about you. So you're getting into a relationship with somebody and then you're gaining. There's returns, like you're learning, you're growing. Do people get into a relationship for the other person to grow?
I think that's where the codependency comes in. So let's use the example I shared. So that's if I choose to do the work. I would say the majority of people in relationships will ignore those mirror moments, right? Because they can be painful and they can be challenging and a little bit scary. And then the person I'm in relationship with also needs to make a conscious choice to do that work as well if they're going to gain and like grow and evolve from it. So I'd say like, honestly, probably the majority of people are not like alchemizing those relationship moments for like learning and growth.
Yeah, it's because I think like from a friendship point of view, like I have made a couple new friends recently, you know, like for my benefit, because they make me feel good. They make me, they challenge me, what I feel, to be a better person.
Yeah.
But in turn, you know, you develop, you know, like feelings for those people as a, you know, as a friend, like you love them as a friend.
Yeah.
I then want to go support them. So now I'm doing stuff for them. You know, I'm going, have a friend that's now performing in improv, and she's performing for the next 4 or 5 Fridays. I'm going to try to go to every single one to support her, and I want to do those things. So like I feel like a friendship, at least from a friendship point of view, like because I can't really speak from an intimate part, but from a friendship point of view, like maybe I start these relationships because I see potential in this person to. There's parts of them that I want to become, or there's parts that I'm inspired by. So it's maybe starts as a little bit selfish, but like it bleeds into, like it leads to like real feelings of like you want to support this person. Because now it's like I you know, and there's stuff like I want to go help these people. I want to help them become wherever they want to go in their life in any ways that I can.
Yeah. And I also feel like often those are the moments where like you'll be at the improv show supporting your friend, and you'll have like an amazing connection with someone, or someone will bring up like a really cool opportunity for you. You'll meet a new podcast guest. You'll get invited to be on a podcast. Like you'll get invited to a cool party where like you meet all these amazing people, and you get someone new to join the associate board at Street Samaritans. I feel like those are the moments when you're just like authentically being the person you want to show up as in the world. And for you, that's like being a supportive friend and learning new skills, stepping outside your comfort zone to do comedy improv. Like those are the moments where like the universe conspires to like give you more good stuff.
Yeah. So we've only got a few minutes here, but I want to ask one question around the discussion group.
Yeah.
Are there any common themes that you see, like as an admin, someone that's reading it every day, of like maybe problems that people are having, like maybe as it relates even to today's generation? Just like what are some common questions? What are some common issues that you're seeing people have in the group? I know it varies from what I've seen. There's a ton of stuff, but like, is there anything that you see as like somewhat reoccurring?
So there's a great quote I love. This is from Esther's second book, which is called The State of Affairs. It's all about infidelity. And it goes something like, sometimes when we seek another in an affair, it's not always the person that we're seeking, but a new version of ourselves. And I feel like in the instances of whether it's someone who is in the throes of infidelity or in a situation where they're kind of on the precipice, it's like, reminds me of this amazing show on HBO called Love and Death with Elizabeth Olsen, which if you like a good crime drama, I highly recommend. But it's like this feeling of itching to get out of the confines of the life that we find ourselves in, and we often think that the other person is like the only way that we can experience that escape, whereas really we're just looking for escape from those confines. And so Esther has so many good quotes. One of the things that we've done in our group is we've created this Google Doc of about 350 quotes and then source links to those quotes. So someone can come in with a challenge around boundaries or loss of desire in a long-term relationship, or like wrestling with masculinity and what that means, and they can search for the keyword and find like all of these great like talks she's done on the topic. So that's kind of one thing that comes to mind. I think in terms of themes, self-abandonment for sure. Like, how do I show up in my relationship for myself? How do I break out of like a long-standing pattern? This person does this, and then I do this, and that triggers them, and then that their trigger response triggers me. Like, I mean, there are all kinds of themes.
Well, I mean, just a couple of takeaways from what you just said. There's so much there, and I wish we can go forever, but this idea that infidelity is more a reflection of who the person is and who they want to become. It's essentially when they're in that relationship, they hold up that mirror, they don't like who they see. And it just kind of goes back to this idea of, in a relationship, you're not going to be, or you shouldn't maybe seek to change the other person, but you may need to be the one, or you are often probably the one who needs to change and create a new version of yourself to keep that relationship alive versus seeking, it via a different person.
Yeah.
No, that's spot on. Yeah.
Is that A+ for effort as well there?
No, that was good. That makes total sense. I mean, I had a long-term relationship that I just didn't. We weren't compatible, and at the end of it, when I was kind of breaking things off, if you will, she was, I'll change. I'll be this person. Like, you wanted to completely self-abandon. I'm like, I don't want you to do that. Like, you need to be yourself. You will find someone that loves you for who you are.
Yeah.
But she wanted to completely change and was willing to, and I'm just like, no, that's not going to work here. Thank you so much for coming on here. And
Did you do a lightning round?
I'm going to do a lightning round. I forgot once. It's like just kicking me for it.
It sounded like you were forgetting.
No. Thank you for enlightening everyone, for being vulnerable on here on a little bit. We haven't had much of a topic or a discussion around relationships. I think it's super important, obviously, and so. Thank you, Leah.
Leah, where can we find you, by the way? I know that you talked about this group, but where can somebody search you up and continue to follow and connect with you?
Definitely. So if you're feeling curious about the Esther Perel discussion group, you can just find us on Facebook. So she spells it ESTHER, and then her last name is PEREL, and then discussion group. And then I often do Facebook Lives with experts on psychology and sex and relationships. And some of those I'll just keep in the group, so you can only view them in the group. And others I'll put on my YouTube channel. So I'll share the link with these guys so they can put it in the show notes. But it's just my name, Leah, and then Marshall with 2 L's, and then YouTube, and you'll find my channel. We've done an interview with Esther. We did an interview with Dr. Shefali Sabari, who I referenced earlier, who's amazing. So many cool people. So check out the channel and see if any video titles entice you.
Yeah, just want to applaud you for what you built. I mean, it's very cool. I saw you have like an annual, what do you got, Perellians, what do you call them?
Yeah, so we
Perellian
call
Award
ourselves,
ceremony.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah. So that's what we call ourselves. We're Perellians.
Okay, so rapid fire questions.
Okay.
First question. This will be easy for you because you are a quoter. You like quotes.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, best piece of advice you've ever received, or just like a favorite quote, something that's resonated with you?
Yeah. I mean, there's a quote, never let your inability to do everything undermine your determination to do something. And that, I just love that one. It's very poetic. I shared the quote about affairs earlier. And I shared, is there another quote I shared?
You shared a very long one.
Yeah.
I was on page.
So, so there's another one I really like. And it goes something like, don't be a thermometer reflecting the temperature in the room, be the thermostat and set the temperature. And the idea of that is, so often we tend to kind of scan the room, scan what everyone else is doing, and mold ourselves to it, versus like showing up how we want to show up, or authentically, or as like our best self. And that's another quote I really like.
I really like that one.
Yeah.
It almost to me just says like be a leader.
Yeah.
Like, very cool. Okay, second question. If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh my God. So it's been a hard year for me because I lost Trevor Noah with The Daily Show, and then James Corden with The Late Late Show. Both of those were like staples in my daily life. Like I would start every single day with James Corden. And I mean, talk about like stand-up comedy. His head writer, Ian Carmel, is like one of my favorite comedians. And then I would end my day with Trevor Noah, and I love humor. Like, sense of humor to me is just, it's like everything. So I would say, I mean, it's tough because Esther Perel, of course, would love to have dinner with.
That's
love,
what came
like,
into my mind.
I love like the three of them together would be so much fun.
All right, that's good. Fair answer.
Reservation for 4. Yeah, no problem.
Last question. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do in your free time?
Okay, so lots of stuff. This is one of the reasons why I think a relationship structure where I have a lot of free time to pursue my hobbies is super important, because the group actually moderating it and overseeing everything takes like a couple hours a day. So the discussion group, I'm super active. I do tennis, I do all kinds of different workouts and yoga and dancing. And bike riding, so like just movement. I do like a couple different things every day. That's really important to me. I'm pretty engaged with my local neighborhood association. So it's called the Old Town Association. It puts on like the Old Town Art Fair. But community is like one of my highest values. Like, community is super, super important to me. So like being plugged into like people around me, and we just did this like amazing Earth Day refresh in a local park that like has made such a difference, and I just love that. I love like working together with other people, like for the good of the neighborhood or for the good of our community, is like really meaningful for me.
That would explain why you're at Street Samaritans.
We met you in that arena.
Yeah, exactly. So that's super important. I would say those are.
And dog sitting.
Oh my God, Hopkins, of course. My hat. So I love Bernese Mountain Dogs, and there are a couple Bernese Mountain Dog families where I'm their go-to sitter and often do like overnights while they're away. And it's interesting because, you know, as I mentioned, I'm like very clear that I don't want kids, but I had never been in a situation where I was like so kind of integral and needed and relied on until I started doing this dog sitting. And it's been like a very powerful experience. I find like it really brings out like this like maternal nurturing side, which I feel like I had kind of stuffed down, and it's like, it's cool to be back in touch with. And Hopkins, who's one of the dogs that I sit for that I'm probably closest with, he just has like the most playful, funny personality, but he's also very anxiously attached. And I find myself like, whereas like with a person, I might like really retract from that, with him, I just like, it just feels so like lovely to be around him and needed in that way. So it's been a very like teaching relationship with him. And yeah, so Bernese Mountain Dogs, I do sitting all the time with them. I could, that makes two of us. Having a dog will teach you a lot about yourself. Yeah.
Thanks again, Leah, for coming on here and having this conversation. We're going to sign off now, but again, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.